a little girl, says to the alpha, "Hi, sir, my mother has a tattoo just like yours." What happened next shocked everyone. When a child unknowingly reveals that her mother bears the sacred mark of his lost mate, the alpha realizes the woman he thought dead has been hiding among his enemies and raising his daughter in secret. Chapter 1. The Alpha's Burden. Autumn mist clung to Thornvale's weathered stones like memories that refused to die. Alpha Tavish Blackthorne stood atop his rebuilt fortress walls, watching the village fair bloom in the valley below. 5 years had passed since the flames consumed everything he held dear, yet the scent of smoke still haunted his dreams. His weathered hand traced the crescent scar carved deep into his chest, a mate bond that should have faded with death, but burned eternal. The Silverfang pack looked to him for strength, but inside, his wolf howled for what was lost. Seraphina had vanished that terrible night, taking with her every reason he'd had for living beyond duty. The autumn wind carried laughter from the fair, children's voices mixing with merchants hawking their wares. Life continued its relentless march, while Tavish remained trapped in the ashes of his past. His advisors urged him to take a new mate, to secure the bloodline, but the very thought felt like betrayal. "My lord," Sir Aemon called from the courtyard below, "the villagers have requested your presence at the harvest celebration." Tavish closed his eyes, summoning the mask of leadership that had become his second skin. His people deserved better than a broken pack leader, even if pretending wholeness felt like wearing armor made of thorns. The fair beckoned with its promise of normalcy, of a world where wounds could heal and hearts could mend. With one last glance at the mountains where she'd disappeared, Tavish descended to face another day of living without his soul's other half. Chapter 2. Unexpected Encounter. The harvest fair transformed the village square into a tapestry of color and sound. Merchants displayed their finest goods, while children chased each other between the stalls, their laughter echoing off cobblestones worn smooth by countless generations. Tavish moved through the crowd like a shadow given form, his presence both revered and feared. Nobles bowed deeply as he passed, their faces masks of careful respect. The pack leader acknowledged each gesture with practiced grace, while his wolf prowled restlessly beneath his skin, seeking something it could not name. Every scent, every sound, every heartbeat registered with supernatural clarity, yet nothing satisfied the void within. "Fresh bread, my lord," called a baker, offering his finest loaf with trembling hands. "Blessed harvest herbs for your table," added an herb woman, her weathered face creasing with hope. Tavish accepted their offerings with quiet gratitude, understanding that generosity flowed both ways. These people looked to him for protection, for the strength to face whatever darkness might threaten their peaceful existence. Their faith in his power was absolute, even when his own faith had crumbled to dust. A commotion near the puppet show caught his attention, children gathering around a colorful stage where wooden knights battled dragons. Their innocent joy struck something deep within his chest, a reminder of dreams he'd once harbored of watching his own cubs play in sunlit meadows. The thought brought familiar pain, sharp and unforgiving. Somewhere in those mountains, Seraphina's bones lay cold and forgotten, along with any children they might have created together. The future had died with her in those flames. Chapter 3. A Voice from the Past. Tavish turned to leave when something small and warm collided with his legs. A little girl, no more than 6 winters old, stumbled backward and looked up with the brightest emerald eyes he'd ever seen. Something stirred in his chest, recognition without understanding, a pull he couldn't explain. "Oh," she gasped, then smiled with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "Hi, sir," before he could respond. Tiny fingers tugged at his ceremonial cloak. "My mother has a mark just like yours," she announced with innocent wonder, pointing to the crescent scar visible at his throat. The world stopped. Blood turned to ice in his veins as every muscle in his body locked rigid. His wolf surged forward, suddenly alert, suddenly desperate. The child's scent washed over him, wild flowers and morning dew, but underneath lay something else, something familiar and impossible. "What did you say?" The words escaped as barely more than a whisper. "The pretty curved mark on your neck," the girl continued, oblivious to the earthquake she'd triggered. Mama has one too, right here. She touched her own small shoulder, precisely where a she-wolf's bond would rest. Tavish's vision blurred. The fair around them faded to meaningless noise as his enhanced senses focused entirely on this child. Her heart beat, steady and strong, her scent carrying traces of something he'd thought lost forever. Her bright gaze, familiar as forest depths, and achingly recognizable. "Where is your mother?" he managed, his voice rough with emotions he'd buried deep. The girl beamed and pointed toward the herb stalls. "She's buying healing plants. We're visiting for the fair." Tavish's legs moved without conscious command, drawn by an invisible thread toward a destiny he'd never dared imagine might still exist. Chapter 4. Recognition and Denial. 3 days passed in agonizing uncertainty as Tavish searched every corner of the village. The child had vanished like morning mist, leaving only questions that burned through his soul. Sleep eluded him as he paced the fortress halls, his wolf clawing frantically at the cage of his ribs. Sir Aemon watched his leader's deterioration with growing concern. "My lord, perhaps you should rest. The council meeting." "Cancel it," Tavish growled, his control fraying with each passing hour. Hope was a poison he'd sworn never to taste again, yet it coursed through his veins like liquid fire. The child's words echoed endlessly. "My mother has a mark just like yours." The mate bond, sacred and unbreakable, could only be removed by death itself, if someone bore his mark. On the 4th dawn, as golden light painted the marketplace, he saw her. Seraphina stood beside the fountain, hood drawn low, but unable to hide the graceful curve of her neck, or the way she moved like water given form. His mate, his soul, his everything, alive and breathing and close enough to touch. Their gazes met across the square. Hers widened with shock and something that might have been terror. Before he could take a single step, she spun and fled, disappearing into the crowd with supernatural speed. "Seraphina!" The name tore from his throat like a war cry. He gave chase, pushing through startled villagers and overturning market stalls in his desperation. But she was gone, vanishing into the labyrinth of streets, as if she'd never been there at all. Only her scent remained, faint but unmistakably real. His mate lived. After half a decade of grief and emptiness, everything he'd believed was a lie. Chapter 5. The hunt begins. Seraphina's flight only strengthened Tavish's resolve. She was alive, which meant answers existed for questions that had tormented him through countless sleepless nights. Why had she run? Where had she been? And most importantly, why was she hiding from the mate who would have died to protect her? He deployed every resource at his disposal. Pack scouts combed the surrounding forests, while trusted allies questioned merchants and travelers. The child's existence proved Seraphina hadn't fled alone, which added new urgency to his search. His daughter, for what else could she be, deserved to know her father. "Expand the search to the northern settlements," he commanded Sir Aemon. "Question everyone. Someone must have seen them." "My lord," his beta ventured carefully. "Perhaps Lady Seraphina has reasons for avoiding contact. The fire that night—" "Changed nothing," Tavish cut him off sharply. "She is my mate, my Luna. Whatever happens, we face it together." But doubt gnawed at his certainty. Years of silence spoke of deliberate choice rather than circumstance. The way she'd looked at him, not with joy or relief, but with fear and something that might have been guilt, suggested secrets darker than simple survival. Still, his wolf refused to accept defeat. Every fiber of his being strained toward her, following a bond that death itself couldn't sever. She was his other half, the piece of his soul he'd thought lost forever. Whatever walls stood between them, he would tear them down with his bare hands if necessary. The hunt would continue until she had nowhere left to run. Chapter 6. Cornered. 2 weeks of relentless searching finally bore fruit when a traveling merchant reported seeing a woman matching Seraphina's description at the mountain village of Millbrook. Tavish arrived before dawn, his small company of trusted wolves surrounding the settlement like a net designed to catch fleeing prey. She was there, just as the merchant had promised. Tavish watched from the tree line as she emerged from a modest cottage, the same child clinging to her skirts. Even from a distance, her beauty struck him like a physical blow, unchanged by the years, as radiant as the day she'd vanished from his life. "Surround the village," he commanded his men. "No one enters or leaves without my permission." This time, she wouldn't escape. This time, they would have the conversation that was years overdue, no matter how much pain it might bring. His daughter deserved truth, even if that truth shattered the careful peace he'd built from the ashes of his loss. He approached the cottage directly, making no attempt at stealth. Let her know he was coming. Let her understand that running was no longer an option. The time for games had ended the moment he'd learned she lived. Serafina must have sensed his presence because she froze in her doorway, every muscle taut as a bowstring. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other across 20 yards of empty ground. Then she grabbed the child and bolted for the forest. "Mama!" the little girl cried, as she was swept up in her mother's arms. Tavish's wolf exploded into motion, covering the distance in seconds. He caught them at the forest edge, his hands closing gently but firmly around Serafina's shoulders. "Enough," he said quietly. "We need to talk." Chapter 7: Confrontation. Serafina turned in his grasp like a cornered wildcat, emerald eyes blazing with defiance and desperation. "Let us go, Tavish. Please?" The sound of his name on her lips sent shockwaves through his system. After years of wondering if he'd ever hear that beloved voice again, the reality of it nearly brought him to his knees. But her words carried rejection rather than welcome, confusion rather than joy. "Not until you explain where you've been," he replied, his grip gentle but unyielding. "Not until you tell me why you're running from your own mate." "I'm not—" She stopped, glancing down at the child who watched their exchange with wide, curious eyes. "This isn't the place." "Then where?" Tavish pressed. "Your cottage? My fortress? Name any location you prefer, but this conversation happens now." Serafina's shoulders sagged in defeat. "The old mill by the stream. Give me 1 hour to make arrangements for—" She gestured toward the little girl. "Our daughter comes with us," Tavish stated firmly, studying the child's features with new understanding. The shape of her nose mirrored his own, while her stubborn chin clearly came from her mother. "She deserves to know her father." "She doesn't know about—" Serafina began. "Then it's time she learned," he interrupted. 1 hour, Serafina. Don't make me hunt you again." He released her but remained close enough to prevent escape. His pack members emerged from their concealment, forming a loose perimeter that communicated the futility of flight without appearing threatening. Whatever had driven her into hiding, whatever secrets she carried, the truth would emerge today. His daughter smiled up at him with innocent trust, and Tavish felt his heart crack open for the first time in years. Chapter 8. Revelations. The old mill sat beside a gurgling stream, its wheel long since broken, but its stone walls still sound. Tavish waited in the shadowed interior, every sense alert for signs of treachery. Serafina had given him an hour. Would she use it to flee once more, or finally face the reckoning that destiny demanded? She arrived precisely when promised. The child's hand clutched tight in hers. Autumn sunlight streaming through broken rafters illuminated her face, revealing lines of weariness that spoke of difficult years. Yet she remained achingly beautiful, the other half of his soul made manifest in flesh and breath. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I didn't have much choice." Her voice carried a bitter edge that cut through his chest like silver. "You made that clear enough." The child, his daughter, looked around the mill with fascination before settling on a pile of old grain sacks. Her presence transformed the confrontation into something more complex than simple recrimination. Whatever had happened between him and Serafina, this innocent soul deserved protection from their pain. "What is her name?" Tavish asked, gentling his tone. "Sophia," Serafina replied after a moment's hesitation. "Sophia Blackthorne," he mused, testing how the words felt on his tongue. They fit perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their proper places. "My daughter." "She doesn't know," Serafina warned sharply. "To her, we're just travelers. I won't have you confusing her with claims of—" "Claims." The word emerged as a growl that made little Sophia look up with interest rather than fear. "She carries my bloodline. The resemblance is unmistakable." Serafina's composure finally cracked. revealing the anguish she'd hidden beneath years of careful control. "Please, Tavish, just let us go." "Never again," he vowed, stepping closer. "Tell me where you've been. Explain why you disappeared. Make me understand why my mate chose exile over her proper place at my side." Chapter 9: Painful Truth. Serafina's laugh held no humor, only the bitter edge of old wounds reopened. "My proper place? Is that what you think this is about?" "I think," Tavish said carefully, "that years ago our home burned and you vanished. I think I spent months searching for your body in the ruins. I think I've mourned a death that never happened. Maybe I did die that night." Her voice dropped to a whisper that carried the weight of unspeakable trauma. "Maybe the woman you loved burned with the rest of your precious fortress." Little Sophia looked between her parents with growing concern, sensing the emotional undercurrents without understanding their source. Tavish forced his voice to remain calm, unwilling to frighten the child further. "The bond says otherwise," he pointed out, touching the scar on his throat. "It endures because you endure." "The bond?" Serafina's gaze flashed with something that might have been hate. "Do you know what your precious bond cost me? What it continued to cost every single day I carried your child? Explain it to me." "I was trapped in the fire because of it," she said, each word carefully measured. "Trapped by magic that used our connection to hold me prisoner. Trapped by people who wanted me to burn with everything else you'd built." The confession hit him like a physical blow. "That's impossible. The bond protects." "The bond can be twisted," Serafina cut him off harshly. "Turned into chains instead of comfort. Used as a weapon by those who understand its nature." Tavish's mind raced through the implications. If someone had deliberately targeted their mate bond. If the fire hadn't been random destruction but calculated assault. "Who?" he demanded. "Who would dare?" "Ask yourself who benefits when a pack leader lacks his Luna," she replied cryptically. "Ask yourself who gains power when the Blackthorne line ends." The answer crystallized with horrifying clarity, and Tavish's world tilted on its axis once again. Chapter 10: Betrayal Revealed. "Magnus," Tavish breathed, the name tasting like poison on his tongue. Lord Magnus Ravencrest, his most trusted advisor. The man who'd stood by his side through countless battles and political struggles. The same man who'd organized the search parties after the fire. Who'd comforted him through the darkest days of grief. Who'd urged him repeatedly to take a new mate and secure the succession. "He wanted me for himself," Serafina continued, her voice hollow with old pain. "Had wanted me since before our bonding ceremony. When I refused his advances, he decided that if he couldn't have me, no one could." "The magical trap. Runes carved into our bedroom floor," she confirmed. "Designed to turn our bond into binding chains when the fire reached them. I was meant to burn slowly. Trapped by the very connection that should have saved me." Tavish's hands clenched into fists as rage built in his chest like molten metal. Magnus had been like a father to him, a mentor who'd guided his early years as pack leader. The betrayal cut deeper than any sword. Deeper than the loss of Serafina herself. "How did you escape?" "Elder Marin found me," Serafina replied. "The village healer. She recognized what the runes were doing and managed to weaken them enough for me to break free. But by then," she gestured helplessly, "the damage was done. I was pregnant and alone, with nowhere to turn." "You could have come to me." "With what proof?" Her laugh was bitter as the winter wind. Magnus covered his tracks perfectly. "To everyone else, I was simply another casualty of the fire, and I was weak, Tavish. The magical backlash nearly killed me." Little Sophia chose that moment to approach, tugging on her mother's skirt. "Mama, why are you sad?" Serafina knelt and gathered the child close, pressing her face into dark curls that mirrored Tavish's own. "Just old memories, little one. Nothing for you to worry about." But Tavish was worrying enough for all of them. Magnus still lived, still served as his advisor, still had access to everything and everyone Tavish held dear. Chapter 11: Planning Return. 3 days of careful conversation followed as Tavish absorbed the magnitude of his advisor's betrayal. They remained at the mill while he processed revelations that reframed everything he thought he knew about the past years. Serafina had survived through luck and Elder Marin's intervention, then spent years in hiding, protecting their daughter from enemies she couldn't name or prove existed. I won't return to court, she stated firmly during their evening discussion. Not while Magnus holds power. He won't hold power much longer, Tavish replied, his voice carrying the promise of retribution. But I need evidence. Accusations alone won't be enough to convince the Pack Council. The runes might still be there, Seraphina suggested. In the ruins of our old chambers. Elder Marin said they were carved deep, meant to be permanent. Sophia played with wooden dolls nearby, content in the strange new reality of having two parents instead of one. The child adapted with remarkable ease, calling Tavish Papa, as if the word had always existed in her vocabulary. Her innocent acceptance helped heal wounds neither adult had dared acknowledge. There's another problem, Seraphina continued quietly. My wolf never fully returned after that night. The magical backlash damaged something essential. I can't shift, can't access most of my supernatural abilities. The admission explained much about her earlier flight and continued fear. Without her wolf's strength and healing, she was vulnerable in ways that would make any threat exponentially more dangerous. Magnus would exploit that weakness without hesitation if he learned of her survival. Then we'll have to be clever instead of strong, Tavish decided. Use his arrogance against him. What do you propose? A trap of our own, he said, beginning to smile for the first time in years, with the perfect bait. Chapter 12. The Gambit. Tavish returned to his fortress alone, leaving Seraphina and Sophia safely hidden in Elder Marin's cottage. His pack welcomed him with relief, unaware that their leader now moved through the halls with predatory purpose. Every conversation with Magnus became a delicate dance of misdirection and careful probing. You seem troubled, my lord, Magnus observed during their weekly council meeting. The search for Lady Seraphina continues to weigh heavily upon you. I've decided to stop searching, Tavish lied smoothly. It's time to accept that she's gone and move forward with the succession. Interest flickered in Magnus's pale eyes. A wise decision. The pack needs stability, and an unmated leader weakens our position with neighboring territories. Precisely what I was thinking. Tavish leaned back in his chair, projecting casual confidence. I've been considering Lady Alara of the Windmere Pack. Her father has been pressing for an alliance. An excellent choice, Magnus agreed quickly. Shall I arrange a formal meeting? In 2 weeks, Tavish confirmed. I want everything perfect for her arrival. New chambers prepared, the finest furnishings, a ceremonial feast to mark our betrothal. Magnus practically glowed with satisfaction, no doubt envisioning his increased influence over a new Luna, who would owe her position to his guidance. The man's ambition made him predictable, which was exactly what Tavish needed. That night, he slipped away from the fortress and rode hard to Elder Marin's cottage. Seraphina waited in the garden, moonlight turning her hair to silver silk. Is he taking the bait? She asked without preamble. Like a starving wolf, Tavish confirmed. In 14 days, when Lady Alara arrives for the betrothal ceremony, Magnus will expect to consolidate his power. Instead, he'll find himself facing judgment. And Sophia will be safely away from the fortress when justice is served, he promised. This I swear to you. Chapter 13. Old Wounds. The 14 days passed with agonizing slowness as Tavish maintained his performance for Magnus, while secretly preparing for confrontation. Every smile felt like swallowing glass. Every casual conversation a test of his self-control. Only the knowledge that Seraphina and Sophia remained safe allowed him to function. Elder Marin proved to be an unexpected ally, sharing information about the magical techniques Magnus had employed. Blood magic, she explained during one of Tavish's clandestine visits. Old and forbidden, tied to lunar cycles. The runes would have been activated by the full moon's power. Can they be broken? Seraphina asked, touching her shoulder where the mat bond should have blazed. With the right counter-ritual, yes. But it requires both mates to participate willingly, and the location where the original binding occurred. Their old chambers, destroyed in the fire, but recently excavated as part of the fortress rebuilding. Tavish had insisted on clearing the rubble personally, claiming sentimental attachment. Now he understood why. Some part of him had always known he would need that space again. There's something else, Marin continued hesitantly. The child carries traces of the same magic. Not enough to harm her, but enough to make her a powerful focus for ritual work. Tavish's blood turned to ice. You mean I mean, Magnus could use Sophia to complete what he started, the elder confirmed grimly. Her existence makes both of you more vulnerable, not less. The revelation added new urgency to their plans. Whatever happened during the coming confrontation, their daughter's safety had to remain paramount. Magnus would discover soon enough that some betrayals carried a price too steep for any ambition to justify. Chapter 14. Gathering Storm. Lady Alara arrived with appropriate fanfare, her retinue filling the fortress courtyard with color and pageantry. Tavish played his role perfectly, greeting his supposed bride-to-be with courtly grace, while Magnus orchestrated every detail of the elaborate charade. "She's lovely," Magnus murmured as they watched servants unload wedding gifts. "The alliance will strengthen our position considerably." "I'm sure it will," Tavish agreed, though his thoughts remained fixed on the real Luna, hidden miles away. Tonight, under the full moon's power, old sins would finally face their reckoning. The betrothal feast proceeded according to Magnus's carefully laid plans. Speeches were made, toasts offered, political alliances celebrated by nobles who had no idea they were witnessing the prelude to justice rather than joy. Tavish endured it all with practiced patience, waiting for the moment when masks could finally be discarded. That moment came when Magnus approached with a goblet of wine intended for the ceremonial toast. "To new beginnings, my lord," he said with oily satisfaction. Tavish accepted the cup, but didn't drink, instead setting it aside with deliberate care. "Actually, Magnus, I think we should discuss old endings first." Confusion flickered across the advisor's features. "My lord?" "Tell me about the fire years ago," Tavish said conversationally. "About the runes you carved into my bedchamber floor. About the Luna you tried to murder." The color drained from Magnus's face like water from a broken vessel. Around them, the feast continued in blissful ignorance, but Tavish's enhanced hearing caught the subtle pause in his advisor's heartbeat. The telltale sign of fear suddenly unleashed. "I don't know what you're talking about," Magnus managed. "Don't you?" Tavish smiled, and for the first time in years, let his wolf show through his eyes. "Then perhaps my mate can refresh your memory." Chapter 15. Justice Unveiled. Seraphina emerged from the shadows at the hall's far end, moving with careful grace despite her weakened condition. Gasps rippled through the assembled nobles as they recognized the woman they'd mourned as dead. But Tavish's attention remained fixed on Magnus, watching shock and rage war across his advisor's pale features. "Impossible," Magnus breathed. "You burned?" "I watched." "You watched me nearly die," Seraphina corrected, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent hall. "But nearly isn't the same as completely, is it?" "My lady," Lady Alara said uncertainly. "I don't understand. Lord Tavish said you were—" "I apologize for the deception," Tavish addressed his confused guest. "But justice required witnesses, and some truths are too dangerous to reveal without proper preparation." Sir Aemon stepped forward, his hand resting on his sword hilt. Years of loyal service had taught him to read his leader's moods, and the predatory stillness radiating from Tavish spoke of violence barely restrained. "What accusations are being made?" Aemon asked formally. "Treason," Tavish replied without hesitation. "Attempted murder through magical means, conspiracy to destroy the bloodline." Magnus's composure shattered completely. "You cannot prove—" "Can't I?" Tavish gestured toward Seraphina. "My Luna bears the scars of your blood magic. The runes still exist in the ruined chambers, carved with your own hand, and I suspect a thorough search of your quarters will reveal other evidence." "This is madness," Magnus snarled, his cultured mask falling away to reveal the desperate ambition beneath. "You would trust the word of a broken woman over years of faithful service. I trust the bond that connects us," Tavish said quietly. "The bond you tried to corrupt for your own purposes." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs as the full magnitude of the accusations became clear. Chapter 16. Ancient Magic. Elder Marin entered the hall with surprising dignity for a village healer, her weathered hands carrying a wooden box that seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy. The assembled nobles parted before her like wheat before a scythe, sensing power that transcended political rank. "My lords and ladies," she announced formally, "I bring evidence of blood magic used against the Blackthorne line." Magnus backed away from the approaching elder, his face a mask of barely controlled terror. You have no authority here. Crone. I have the authority of truth, Marin replied, calmly, opening her box to reveal blackened stone fragments carved with twisted runes. These pieces come from the chamber where Lady Seraphina nearly died. The magic lingers still, waiting for justice. Gasps echoed through the hall as supernatural energy pulsed from the stones. Even non-magical nobles could feel the wrongness emanating from the artifacts. The corruption of something meant to bind in love, being twisted toward hatred and destruction. The runes speak of their creator, Marin continued, her gaze finding Magnus across the crowded space. Blood calls to blood, intention to intention. Would you care to explain why they resonate with your presence, Lord Magnus? Lies, Magnus shouted, but his voice cracked with desperation. Fabricated evidence meant to... The stones flared with sudden light, responding to his emotional outburst with unmistakable recognition. The magical signature was clear to anyone with supernatural senses. Magnus's power had created those runes, had fed them with malice and jealousy until they became instruments of murder. The evidence speaks for itself, Tavish observed with grim satisfaction. Seraphina moved closer, her presence causing the stones to pulse with gentler light. Show them the binding, she said quietly to Marin. The elder nodded and began to chant in the old tongue, words of power that predated human civilization. The runic fragments rose from their box, hovering in the air as invisible forces arranged them into their original pattern. The assembled nobles watched in fascination and horror as the full scope of Magnus's betrayal became visible. Chapter 17. The Luna's Power. The reconstructed rune circle blazed with malevolent energy, its pattern designed to trap and torment rather than protect and cherish. Even weakened by time and damage, the magical construct radiated such wrongness that several nobles stepped back in instinctive fear. Behold the perversion of sacred bonds, Elder Marin pronounced solemnly. Love turned to chains, trust transformed into betrayal. Seraphina approached the hovering runes, despite Tavish's protective gesture. Her damaged connection to her wolf made her vulnerable, but it also allowed her to perceive the magic's true nature without being overwhelmed by its malice. I remember this pattern, she said softly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. Burned into my skin when the fire reached our chamber, holding me prisoner while smoke filled my lungs and flames consumed everything around me. Seraphina, Tavish warned, sensing the emotional cost of her reliving that terrible night. No, she replied firmly. They need to understand what was done, what was attempted. She extended her hand toward the runes, and they responded with vicious energy that made her gasp in pain. But something else happened as well. The mate bond on her shoulder began to glow with pure silver light, fighting against the corruption with power drawn from love itself. The bond endures, Marin observed with wonder. Even damaged, even twisted, the core remains true. Magnus watched in growing horror as his carefully crafted trap revealed its weaknesses. The magic he'd perverted was fighting back, choosing love over hatred, unity over separation. His greatest weapon had become his ultimate downfall. Impossible, he whispered. The ritual was perfect. You should have died. You should have burned. But I didn't, Seraphina replied, her mark blazing brighter with each word. Love proves stronger than your hate. The admission seemed to snap Magnus's remaining sanity, and his hand moved toward the dagger at his belt, with deadly intent. Chapter 18. Confrontation's Edge. Magnus's blade cleared its sheath with the desperate speed of a cornered predator. Steel flashed in the runic light as he lunged toward Seraphina, madness replacing cunning in his pale eyes. But he'd forgotten that even a wounded Luna remained under her mate's protection. Tavish moved with supernatural quickness, intercepting the attack before it could reach its target. His own sword sang as it met Magnus's blade, the clash of steel ringing through the hall like a bell tolling judgment. Around them, nobles scrambled for safety, while guards moved to contain the violence. Stand down, Magnus, Tavish commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a pack leader in full fury. You've already lost. Don't make this worse. Worse? Magnus laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. You think it can get worse? Everything I've worked for, Everything I've built, destroyed by a woman who should have died years ago. He pressed his attack with the skill of a trained warrior, but desperation made him sloppy. Tavish parried each strike with contemptuous ease, his enhanced strength and reflexes, turning the duel into a foregone conclusion. Yet something in Magnus's bearing suggested more than simple madness. You're stalling, Tavish realized, waiting for something. Magnus's grin was answer enough. The runes above them began to pulse with renewed energy, responding to the violence in their presence. Elder Marin cried out in warning, but her words came too late. Blood magic requires blood, Magnus snarled, deliberately allowing Tavish's blade to nick his sword arm. Red droplets fell onto the runic pattern, and the ancient trap blazed to life with all its original malevolence. Seraphina screamed as invisible chains of corrupted power wrapped around her spirit, the same bonds that had nearly killed her years before. But this time, she wasn't alone in their grip. The reactivated magic reached for Tavish as well, seeking to complete the destruction it had been designed to accomplish. Chapter 19. Bond's Unbreakable Pain. Like molten silver coursed through Tavish's veins as the rune's power sought to tear his bond with Seraphina apart. Thread by thread, the agony drove him to his knees, his sword clattering forgotten on the stone floor. Across the hall, his mate writhed in similar torment as ancient magic tried to finish what it had started. But something was different this time. Where years ago Seraphina had faced the trap alone and weakened by pregnancy, now she had her mate's full strength to draw upon. Their bond, tested by time and distance, had grown stronger rather than weaker during their separation. Together, Elder Marin shouted over the magical storm. You must face it together. Tavish forced himself upright through sheer will, staggering toward Seraphina as the rune's power fought to keep them apart. Each step felt like walking through forge fire, but love provided strength that duty alone could never match. Their fingers touched across the space between them, and silver light exploded from the contact. Magnus shrieked in fury as his trap turned against itself. The blood magic had been designed to corrupt a willing bond, to twist love into hatred and trust into betrayal. But faced with connection that refused to break despite years of separation and pain, the spell found no purchase. Impossible, Magnus raged. The ritual was perfect. You cannot... His words cut off as the runes began to crack, their malevolent energy turning chaotic. Elder Marin's eyes went wide with sudden understanding. The circle is collapsing, she warned. Everyone out? Now! Noble guests fled the hall in panic as magical energy built toward critical release. But Tavish and Seraphina remained locked in their struggle, their joined hands the only anchor point in a storm of corrupted power seeking somewhere to discharge. Magnus, realizing his trap had become his own doom, turned to flee, but found his path blocked by Sir Aemon and a contingent of loyal guards. Justice demands satisfaction, Aemon declared grimly. Face your leader's judgment, traitor. Chapter 20. Purification. The runic circle shattered with a sound like breaking crystal, its corrupted energy dissipating into harmless sparks that faded against the hall's time-worn stones. Where malevolent magic had burned moments before, only clean moonlight remained, streaming through windows to bathe the scene in silver radiance. Tavish and Seraphina collapsed together, their hands still intertwined as the last echoes of the magical storm faded. But the mark on Seraphina's shoulder blazed with renewed vitality, no longer corrupted by Magnus's influence. Their bond, tested by the ultimate trial, had emerged purified and stronger than ever. Is it over? She whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. It's over, Tavish confirmed, helping her to her feet. Around them, the scattered remnants of the runic fragments had turned to ordinary stone, their power broken forever. Magnus knelt in Sir Aemon's grip, his face a mask of defeat and disbelief. The magical backlash had aged him visibly, silver threading through his dark hair and lines carving themselves around his eyes. For the first time since Tavish had known him, the man looked fragile rather than commanding. How? Magnus asked plaintively. The spell was flawless. It should have worked. Because you fundamentally misunderstood what you were trying to destroy, Elder Marin replied, her tone carrying more pity than anger. A true mate bond isn't a weakness to be exploited. It's a strength that grows through adversity. Love endures, Serafina added quietly. Even when corrupted, even when twisted, the core remains pure. That's what you could never accept. Tavish looked down at the man who had been like a father to him, feeling sorrow rather than satisfaction in his victory. Why, Magnus? I would have trusted you with my life. Because she was supposed to be mine, Magnus whispered. I saw her first. I loved her first. But she chose the young pack leader over the wise advisor. And everything I had worked for became meaningless. The confession hung in the air like a funeral dirge, revealing the petty jealousy that had destroyed so many lives. Chapter 21. Justice served. Dawn light filtered through the hall's windows as the Pack Council convened to pass judgment on Magnus's crimes. The evidence was overwhelming: magical artifacts, witness testimony, and his own confession leaving no room for doubt or mercy. Yet Tavish felt no satisfaction as he pronounced the inevitable sentence. For the crime of treason against the bloodline, he intoned formally, for the attempted murder of the Luna through magical means, and for conspiracy to destroy the sacred bonds that unite our pack, I sentence you to exile beyond the borders of all civilized territories. Magnus raised his head, surprise flickering in his defeated eyes. You're not executing me? Death would be a mercy, Tavish replied coldly. Live with the knowledge of what your jealousy cost, and never forget that love proved stronger than your hatred. Sir Aemon and his guards escorted the broken man from the hall, their duty performed without joy, but with absolute resolve. Magnus would survive, but as a cautionary tale rather than a threat. A reminder of how ambition unchecked by wisdom could corrupt even the most trusted souls. It's truly finished, Serafina breathed, sagging against Tavish's shoulder. The justice is finished, he agreed, holding her close. But we have a future to build. The assembled nobles began to disperse, their excitement over the dramatic revelations gradually giving way to practical considerations of what came next. Lady Alara approached with gracious understanding, releasing Tavish from their betrothal contract with good humor and genuine congratulations. Take care of each other, she advised as she prepared to depart. True love is rarer than political alliance. Elder Marin lingered after the others had gone, her weathered hands sorting through her magical supplies with practiced efficiency. There's one more thing, she said quietly. The child, Sophia. She should be tested for magical aptitude. Is she in danger? Serafina asked sharply. Not danger, Marin assured her. But she carries traces of both bloodlines, plus exposure to the corrupted magic. She may develop abilities neither parent possessed. Chapter 22. Family reunited. 3 days later, little Sophia Blackthorne stood in the fortress's great hall, her small hand clasped in her father's larger one, as servants bustled about preparing for the restoration ceremony. The child had adapted to her new life with remarkable resilience, treating the grand castle as an elaborate playground and the pack members as an extended family, eager to indulge their leader's daughter. Will there be cake? She asked Tavish seriously, having learned that important ceremonies usually included elaborate desserts. Lots of cake, he promised, smiling down at her upturned face. And dancing, and presents. What kind of presents? The kind that celebrates new beginnings, Serafina answered, joining them in a gown that transformed her from village healer back into Luna of the Silverfang Pack. The restoration of her magical abilities was progressing slowly but steadily, her wolf gradually emerging from the trauma-induced hibernation that had lasted years. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Elder Marin performed the ritual that would formally restore Serafina's status, while pack members lined the hall to witness their Luna's return. No elaborate speeches or political maneuvering, just the acknowledgement of bonds that had never truly been broken. Do you, Serafina of the Forest Clans, accept restoration as Luna of the Silverfang Pack? I do, she replied, her voice clear and strong. Do you, Tavish Blackthorne, accept your mate's return with all the responsibilities and joys that accompany it? I do, he answered, feeling the last pieces of his shattered world click back into place. When the formal words ended and the celebration began, Sophia clapped her hands with delight as musicians filled the hall with joyous melodies. The little girl danced between her parents, unconsciously weaving the family back together through the simple magic of a child's love. Happy, Tavish asked Seraphina as they watched their daughter spin in circles, her laughter echoing off weathered stones. Complete, she replied, and leaned up to kiss him for the first time in years. Chapter 23. New Traditions. Winter's grip loosened as spring returned to Thornvale, bringing with it the renewal that had seemed impossible just months before. The Silverfang pack settled into new rhythms that accommodated their restored Luna's unique perspective and their young heir's boundless curiosity about her heritage. Sophia proved to be a quick study in pack dynamics. Though her innocent questions sometimes challenged traditions that had gone unexamined for generations. "Why can't the children from the village play here?" she asked during one of their evening walks through the fortress gardens. "Because they're human," Tavish explained automatically, then paused as he recognized the inadequacy of that answer. "So was Mama when you first met," Sophia pointed out with 6-year-old logic. "And she's the Luna now." Seraphina exchanged a meaningful look with her mate. "Perhaps," she suggested carefully, "it's time to reconsider some of our old boundaries." The changes that followed were gradual but significant. Village children began visiting the fortress for festivals and celebrations, their presence adding new energy to ceremonies that had grown stale with repetition. Human healers worked alongside their supernatural counterparts, sharing knowledge that benefited both communities. "You're transforming more than just our family," Sir Eamon observed one afternoon, as he watched mixed groups of children playing in the courtyard. "Change was inevitable," Tavish replied. "Seraphina simply helped us choose the direction, rather than letting circumstances choose for us." Elder Marin had established a permanent residence in the fortress, her expertise in magical healing proving invaluable as Seraphina's abilities continued to strengthen. The old woman's presence also provided stability for Sophia, whose developing powers required careful guidance. "She dreams in colors that don't exist yet," Marin reported after one of her sessions with the child. "And sometimes, she knows things before they happen." The implications were both exciting and concerning, but Tavish had learned to trust in Love's ability to overcome any challenge. Chapter 24. Prophecy Fulfilled. The summer solstice brought visitors from across the realm to witness the formal presentation of the Blackthorne heir to the greater supernatural community. Sophia, now 7 years old and growing more confident each day, charmed visiting dignitaries with the same innocent directness that had first revealed her mother's survival. "My papa is the strongest pack leader," she informed a delegation of neighboring territories, "but my mama is the smartest. Together, they can fix anything." The visiting nobles smiled indulgently at the child's declaration, not realizing they were hearing prophecy rather than simple devotion. Seraphina had indeed been transforming pack politics through careful diplomacy and innovative solutions to old problems. "The alliance proposals from the Eastern Territories," she reported to Tavish during their private council session. "I think we can structure them to benefit everyone involved, including the human settlements." "Especially the human settlements," she confirmed. "They have resources we need, and we have protection they require. It's time to formalize relationships that have been developing informally for generations." The feast that night celebrated more than Sophia's formal recognition. It marked the beginning of a new era in supernatural politics. Alliance documents were signed under starlight, while children played in gardens that had once known only military exercises. Elder Marin found Tavish standing alone on the battlements as the festivities continued below. "Regrets?" she asked gently. "None," he replied honestly. "Though sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Sophia hadn't stumbled into me that day at the fair." "The same thing eventually," Marin said with certainty. "Love like yours doesn't disappear just because it's hidden. It finds a way to surface, whether through a child's innocent words or some other catalyst." "Destiny. Free will," she corrected. "You both chose to love rather than hate, to trust rather than fear. The rest followed naturally." As if summoned by their conversation, Seraphina appeared with Sophia in her arms, both of them glowing in the moonlight. "Time for bed, little one," Seraphina announced. Chapter 25. Ever after 6 years had passed since that fateful day at the village fair, transforming the Silverfang pack from an isolated fortress into the heart of a thriving alliance that spanned both supernatural and human communities. The prophecies surrounding Sophia's birth had proved accurate. She served as a bridge between worlds, her unique heritage allowing her to see solutions that escape traditional thinking. Mama Papa, 12-year-old Sophia called as she burst into the family's private chambers, her bright gaze sparkling with excitement. The delegation from the far northern Pax has arrived. Tavish set aside the trade agreement he'd been reviewing and smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Even at her young age, Sophia understood the political significance of visits from previously hostile territories. Her very existence had challenged old assumptions about bloodline purity and pack politics. "They've come to see the miracle child for themselves," Serafina observed, joining them by the window that overlooked the courtyard where foreign banners flew alongside their own. "They've come to see what we've built here," Tavish corrected gently. "The alliance succeeds because it benefits everyone, not because of any one person's abilities." The truth was more complex, as they all knew. Sophia's gifts had indeed played a role in the diplomatic breakthroughs of recent years, but her greatest contribution was simpler than prophecy. She reminded adults that cooperation was a choice, not a burden. "Will you tell them the story?" Sophia asked, settling between her parents with practiced ease. "Which story?" Serafina asked with amusement. "How a little girl's words brought a family back together," Sophia replied solemnly. "And how love proves stronger than magic designed to destroy it." Tavish gathered both his girls close, marveling at how completely his world had transformed since that autumn day when innocent curiosity had shattered carefully constructed walls around his heart. The mark on his chest no longer ached with loss. It glowed with connection, with purpose, with the absolute certainty that some bonds truly were unbreakable. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a pack leader who thought he'd lost everything. And as night fell over Thornvale, the story continued. Not ending, but beginning anew with each generation that learned love's greatest lesson. Sometimes the most profound magic lies not in mystical spells or supernatural power, but in the simple courage to trust your heart and never give up hope."